Everyone, welcome to a comics loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted on this episode to be talking with author, publisher, creator Tom Heintjes. Tom, thank you for jumping in. Thank you for joining and talking with me for a few
Hey,
minutes.
I'm flattered to be here, Jason. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think folks out there can readily find you in the publication Hogan's Alley. So that might be a place for us to start. Just a sort of a brief background about your work with Hogan's Alley, maybe.
Yeah. It's primarily a print magazine. We're grimly hanging on to a print vehicle. Um, and some of your older readers might remember a magazine named Nemo, the Classic Comics Library,
Mhm,
uh,
mhm,
which went the way of all things. And Rick Marshall, who was the force behind Nemo, and I became friends, and we started talking about the comics magazine that we would like to see that treated comics in the way that we thought comics uh, deserved.
mhm.
So after a while of blue skying and realizing that no one was ever going to do it the way we thought it should be done, we decided to do it ourselves. And Rick has stepped away from Hogan's Alley by and large. So yeah, now I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. And
Yeah.
we don't come out too often. We're roughly an annual publication, although nothing you can set your watch by. So I got into social media more to let people know that hey, we're still around. You haven't seen a new issue in a while, but I always have one in the works. So, but it's been great. Social media has been a tremendous lifeline for us and a great community. So I think that's how you and I probably touched base. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think we share a love for comics. And I'm curious, we talk a lot on here about what comics can do and possibilities with literacy. So for listeners out there that are maybe unfamiliar with comics or maybe even a little skeptical, curious about your take on what comics can do as a medium.
Well, that's a great question. And I guess I would say that like any art form, and comics is of course an art form, it can, you know, hopefully, ideally, change the way you view the world around you, challenge your perceptions, cause you to think about the world around you in a new way,
Mhm,
uh, cause you to become introduced to ideas that you hadn't considered before. So, yeah, like a good novel, a good movie, uh, a TV show, or any form of art. I think comics can do a whole lot to just shift the way you view the world around you.
love it, love it. And I love that possibility for all art as well and uniting comics with art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hogan's Alley is chiefly into vintage cartooning, although we do have a contemporary aspect. Uh, but I think about a real polarizing but important essential figure like Robert Crumb.
hmm hmm
Robert Crumb, you love him, you hate him, you've heard about him but haven't read him. But he's a guy who took cartooning and really upended a lot of people's assumptions about what a comic book was.
hmm
Um, and he opened a lot of doors, opened a lot of minds, uh, opened a lot of lawsuits. Uh, but a guy like him, he just put pen to paper and changed everything. And you could say the same for a lot of figures like Charles Schultz, certainly, uh, Jack Kirby in a very different way. But yeah, we still see um, their work reverberate through the culture in different ways, and I still think it's very exciting and you can never really be done exploring it, and I think that's what's so great about comics.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask about some creators that currently have your attention, and they don't necessarily have to be contemporary folks, but anybody that you're currently reading and paying attention to that way.
Oh, yeah, it's like sipping from a fire hose. um I mean, I like a lot of older material, going back to George Harriman and Jack Kirby's work, and gosh, so many, Wally Wood, Bernie Krigstein, um, Harvey Kurtzman, certainly,
Mhm,
all
mhm,
those older guys. But there is still a lot of good contemporary work being produced. I think of uh, Kate Beaton's work is really terrific.
mhm,
People came to know her from Hark a Vagrant. Sarah Anderson, with Sarah Scribbles and Fangs, and newer work of hers is really interesting and innovative. And the guy's been around for decades, literally. Bill Griffith,
mhm,
he's
mhm,
still crushing it. He's producing Ziggy, ha, Zippy, the Pinhead. Ziggy's a little different from Zippy.
mhm,
Um, and he just produced a graphic biography of Nancy creator Ernie Bushmiller that has won, you know, a mantle full of awards. And I love Ernie Bushmiller. I love Nancy. That book was very exciting to me. Uh, on the comics page, a lot of this, I hate to name people because a lot of them are my friends, and I'm not going to name them all. But Patrick McDonald, who does Mutts,
mhm,
just got
mhm,
done with a 7-week storyline about his character Guard Dog
mhm,
finally coming off the chain. And you don't see many instances of the public really being gripped by a storyline in the newspaper like you used to, because newspapers are so attenuated now. But that one did, and it really showed that the comic strip and the simple, daily cartoon still exerts a power over people's imaginations and gives them something to look for each day and to be invested in. I thought that was a tremendous accomplishment by Patrick.
mhm, mhm,
Um, Something old and something new, say the new Flash Gordon, by Dan, I'm not sure his name, Shadkey. He's put a really fresh but kind of retro spin on Flash Gordon, who of course has been around since the 30s, almost
mhm,
a century. Um, there's a strip called from King Features, I think it's online only, called Mara Lave, Marallave, and I can't even tell you the creators, but it has a very cool, vintage, illustrative, but cartoony look. It's just terrific. I encourage people to check that out. Um, David Malky's strip, Wonder Mark, is really, really twisted and dark and great and funny. So yeah, there's a lot of contemporary work that is really compelling and very innovative. And cartooning is not dead. You hear, oh, it's dying, it's withering on the vine. It's not. It's really hard, maybe harder than ever to make a living at it. That
mhm.
that's that part is true. But as an art form and as a creative form, it's very vital. And of course, the internet opened up all sorts of possibilities. The economics of it are challenging, but as far as the creative possibilities, it's a very, very exciting time.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much out there and such an ease in accessing it now
Yeah.
that just didn't exist 20 years ago. It's
Right,
pretty incredible.
right. And that gets to what I was just saying. It's there, it's free, it's easy to get to. How does a creator make a living to continue
Mhm,
doing that?
mhm.
Eh, that's the great question. And a few creators have cracked the code, many have not. And it's going to be really interesting to watch how the economics of cartooning evolves. For the longest time, uh, cartoonists were syndicated in the paper.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
Syndicates made a lot of money. Cartoonists made a lot of money. They were, media celebrities. And it was a great economic model until it wasn't.
Right.
The internet came along and upended it and disrupted it like it did so many forms of media. Um, and ever since then, it's it's a tougher road to hoe than it used to be.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, you were talking about creatives that you know, and I'm curious about your approach as an editor, as a compiler of putting together the magazine and also approaching creatives and working with them.
Yeah, there are a number of approaches people take. A lot of it's just putting your head down and doing conventions.
Hmm. Hmm.
If you do enough work that you can put it into a physical form. I mean, selling something physical is still a great way to make some money. It's it takes years sometimes to accumulate a body of work that is large enough to put into a physical form. But if you can do that and you get to shows, you build a name for yourself. It's just the classic business model of building yourself, building an audience, getting name recognition, getting a following. And for a lot of people, it pays off like that.
Hmm.
Um, some people go the Patreon route, and are very successful at it. More power to them. Uh, of course, Kickstarter and other, funding mechanisms like that can be very successful. It's not a one size fits all approach, but yeah. So there are, and when I started publishing Hogan's Alley, the brass ring was still to get a syndicated strip, and you know, people would talk about submitting to the syndicates. Now there's basically two syndicates.
Hmm.
Uh, so that's not the universal path to success that it used to be. Um, so you have to think outside that time-honored box that worked for so long and now is profoundly broken. Um, but yeah, so conventions, you hear this over and over again. Keep producing the work, keep
Hmm.
putting it out there. You'll find your audience will find you. Social media is very important. Uh, I I was at the Rubin Awards in September, which is the annual meeting of the National Cartoonist Society. Great group of people, and they have really respected people presenting the awards to different divisions: comic books, comic strips, editorial, cartoon, and graphic novel, etc. And Kathy Geiswhite was a presenter, and I love Kathy. I have tremendous respect for Kathy. She opened a lot of doors, and she's one of the people who reached a new audience and really spoke to them in a way that people had not before.
Hmm.
And she said that she was so grateful that she came up at a time when all she had to do was write and draw her strip, send it into the syndicate, and move on to the next one. She didn't have to post it to five different platforms and worry about her social media presence and marketing herself. And she hit the nail squarely on the head. All she had to do was be a cartoonist. Now you have to be a cartoonist, and you have to be your marketer, and you have to be your social media liaison, and you have to develop this online persona.
Hmm.
All these things that go along with being a cartoonist that was not the case in decades past. So it's really changed the formula of what it takes to achieve success as a cartoonist.
Yeah, yeah. And in fitting form, my final question is about social media outlets and the spaces where people can find out more about Hogan's Alley and the work that you do.
Well, yeah, that's very, very kind of you to ask. For the longest time, I was on Twitter and built up. And again, it's very incremental, very baby steps. You wonder why you're bothering with this when you have 50 followers, but you stick with it. I don't pay attention anymore to the number of followers I have.
Hmm.
I do what I think is interesting to people. I do what I think is interesting to me. and I have confidence and faith that they will find me and I will find them. And before I knew it, I had like, I don't know, 7,000, 8,000 followers on Twitter. Now, compared to, politicians and actors, that's peanuts, but it was a big community for me. It made a real difference in the way I could reach people.
Hmm.
Um, Also, my approach to social media is not to talk about Hogan's Alley. It's to talk about cartooning, what
Hmm.
I love, what interests me. Occasionally, I'll talk about Hogan's Alley. And when I do, people pay more attention because they know that primarily I love cartooning.
Yeah.
I also publish this magazine that if you're into the kind of stuff I'm into, you should check it out. So there's definitely a benefit, a business benefit to not constantly just talking about my endeavor, my own endeavor.
Hmm.
But since then, I've branched out to Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky. I haven't closed my Twitter account, but I've backed off on my activity there. And I'm on Facebook in a private group that I administer, and I personally admit anyone who wants to be part of it because I tell people there are two rules to being in this group. Everything has to be about comics and no politics, which is, if you can stick to those two rules, we'll have a great time. And we
Hmm.
do have a great time. It's so, it's kind of dispersed among all those different platforms, but collectively it's a tremendous way to reach people. So yeah, that's where I am these days. And we are working on our next print edition. My art director has a ton of stuff put into page layouts, and so he's working on that. So yeah, we've always got something. Uh, this is our example of our physical product.
Love it.
This is
Hmm.
our current issue. It's not that new anymore, but our current issue. Um, so yeah, that's where we are with social media and our print baby.
All right. And with your permission, I'll take the image that you just held up and like paste it on or something like that so that people can get a nice impression of that, if that's okay.
How could I say no to that offer?
All right.
You can, capture the image online or anywhere else, and you get a nicer image than me doing this.
The Zoom backgrounds are so tricky for that. I've held up books before and it's like, where did it go?
Yeah.
Um, but yes, yeah. Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you for talking through. Did we miss anything that you'd like to make sure to mention before we close out?
Well, gosh, we're talking comics. This could go on for hours. So it's probably better to pull the plug on me sooner rather than later. I don't want to lose your audience.
You
But
you are totally fine.
it's been great to talk to you. And anytime we can talk about comics intelligently, man, I am there. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to have you back anytime. Always glad to talk about comics and cartooning.
Maybe you want to have the new issue out, you'll let me back on.
By all means, I would love that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jason.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
You too.